Hi, I'm Tyson.
I'm Colin.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Adam.
And we're the Gamesmith, and we just got done playing Search Party, and we want to talk to you a little bit about our experience with it. To kick us off, Ryan's got some thoughts.
Yeah, so first of all, I think it was a cool experience. I think we all had fun. It was a good co-op experience, and we all enjoyed ourselves. I think the biggest any issues or any kind of nitpicky or specific feedback, I think you can get from just watching the video of us playing, and I think most of our problems with the game were just not understanding things, or can we do this? The rules don't really specify.
Yeah.
So I would pay attention while you're watching the video to all of the questions that we had. And where we landed was we were having fun, and we didn't know if you move a tile, do you move with it? Just because it wasn't explicitly stated one way or the other. And so
Can you ride
see
a
the
breaking
things,
tile?
right? Do you ride the breaking tiles? And maybe we made some
What
other
happens
play mistakes.
when a gem gets picked up and somebody's there?
Yeah,
was
like what
another
happens
thing,
if
like,
you
is
need
that
two
in a
people on a gem
void?
card to pick it up? Are you allowed to walk through those voids? Are you allowed to spend temporary time there and then move off?
Do they have to walk together?
Right, or maybe when Tyson picked that gem up, Adam should have just picked a different card to move on to, and
Right.
it was one away. So I mean, there are things, and none of it was
Game breaking.
None of it made it so it wasn't fun to play anymore, or we didn't understand it. We were just like, well, what do you do? There's 2 or 3 different ways this could go, and so we just kind of picked one and went with it. But you need to make sure that those are spelled out a little more clearly in the room or in the rules, and then also just kind of maybe look for some technical writing and make sure. The biggest thing is consistency with word choice. There was one card where you used the word flip to mean both trade, both swap and rotate.
And you even used the word swap later on.
To explain that the second flip meant to swap, not to flip. So, yeah, I would just definitely, when people are trying to figure out rules and people are having arguments, they're going to point at every little word on the card and say, it says may, or it says must, or it says if, kind of thing like that. And so all of those little words really matter. So that was one of the things that I would take a look at. But I think overall, it's a very solid game.
Yeah.
It was good. We had fun. We understood what we were trying to do. The breaking apart mechanic was cool with the land moving around and everything like that. And that was all very fun. And the exploring and the little bit of memory, having to remember the tiles that got flipped back over and everybody working together. And it was a really good co-op experience. And overall really fun. The only feedback on all that stuff is just maybe be a little more clear in your rules. And we might be the first time that someone's played it where you weren't in the room to answer these questions, and so now you see what answers you should probably put in the rule book ahead of time, based on the questions that we had.
Yeah, I'd like to echo a little bit what Ryan was saying, that I had a good experience with it. I thought it was a fun little experience. It had a lot of interesting decisions between the 4 of us to make, to see, okay, what is the puzzle we're trying to solve and how do we accomplish it? Okay, we know there are 6 gems out there. When do we pick them up? Where do we take them? Who takes them? Etc. And those were fun little puzzles to solve, I think, in a lot of ways. It is similar. It falls in the category of what I would call a true cooperative game. I think you have some games that are cooperative in nature, but that's not necessarily their sole intent. I think of Gloomhaven. It's a cooperative game, but its focus is not on that cooperative puzzle necessarily. But games like Pandemic or Forbidden Island or Forbidden Desert, those Matt Leacock style, what the original co-op was kind of like, is where I think this falls in. And like those other games, it falls prey, I believe, to a similar issue of quarterbacking. The idea or concept that one player can map out what every player needs to do and and
The loudest, most outspoken player in the group ends up controlling
exactly,
the game for everyone.
which again, with cooperative games, there is a market for that, and people like that kind of thing. Sometimes it's just something to be aware of, and if that is your design goal to keep it within that framework, I don't think you necessarily need to change anything. But one way you can look at changing those is providing players with hidden information or specific things that only they are capable of doing, which I think you get at a little bit with those items, but I didn't feel necessarily compelled to use those items. For example, I had the cloak and the trap detector, and I didn't discover half the traps,
Right.
and we were able to get out of those traps for the most part, as well as I didn't. I had the cloak, which helped protect against the bear, but Ryan ended up being bear bait most of the game, and
Right.
and effectively so. And I think that those items just didn't feel like they fit me to a specific role that this is the type of thing I need to be doing, and nobody else can fulfill that.
I would say I found it less of a problem in the beginning, the quarterbacking, because there was so much like we don't know what any
Space to
tile
cover,
is,
yeah.
so it's just like go flip over a card. And then when that card gets flipped over, so I do think you do a better job because in the pandemic style game where all the information is available to everybody, you can really like. It would have been hard for Adam to say that before we started
Right.
Adam's turn to plan out everybody's turn.
Yeah.
That's when I think the quarterbacking gets real bad, which happens in games like Pandemic, where you can just say, okay, for this round, before we even start the round, Adam does this, Ryan does this, Tyson does this, Colin does this. And
Yeah.
This game did have enough of those flip down cards, especially in the beginning, to be while you're exploring and flipping stuff over, it's still very individual, but then towards the end it got very quarterbacky. Once
Yeah.
everything was flipped up, then it was just like, okay, now we are going to, the four of us, just plan this turn together, and then we all might as
Right.
well just move at the same time, because we all know what's going to happen.
Right.
And for me, playing last, it was a little more frustrating because I felt like my options were less than these guys. They got to kind of choose what they wanted to do, and I was like, well, I guess I'm left in a corner. Let me just go over. And I felt like my turn was dictated more than first player. And it would be nice if you would clarify if you could switch up turn order since it's cooperative. Why does it matter who goes first?
Or
If we're all
move it.
working together,
Have a different first player each turn.
Yeah, switch the first player around. That would be nice, or just decide each turn who's going first and doing what based on the information we have.
If that rotating player marker kind of thing would happen, it means that it presents new interesting challenges, because if you needed somebody to move first in the turn order to get away from the bear or distract the bear or some other options, it could create interesting choices. And I agree with that. And I think that Ryan's right about it ramps up to the quarterbacking.
Right.
It's not an onset of that quarterbacking, which is nice. I just think that one way to help ensure that a little bit differently is in the later stages, make those items kind of fit the roles so that they're like, it's more, this person needs to do that, if that's what you want to mitigate. I'm not saying that it necessarily needs it, because I had a good time with it.
I still had fun too.
Yeah.
So I'm still saying I had fun even though that was just
Right.
a small, very small issue.
But I will say that for me, I don't really see me personally, and I may be, I know that my style of play is I like to play a lot of different games. I mean, we all, I think, like the experience of discovering a new game, hence we do this every week and,
Right.
and play a new game, right? But so we may not be that audience you're looking for. But for me, there's not a lot of new challenges to solve in this game. Yes, the variable setup, it changes things around a bit, but it essentially, the only thing it does is it just changes the question of when will something happen rather than what is going to happen. It doesn't. You know what's going to happen every time you play this game.
And
when
you
it's
know
set up.
exactly which win conditions you need. You need to find
Right.
the bear based on the one gem.
Someone's
so
got to bring
like
a fishing pole. Someone's got to take
we
the
discovered the entire
Right.
map. So and it seems like you almost need to every game, or at least get
Right.
close to it. You have to get really lucky not to. And then with gems moving around, and there's just a lot of questions. But the true answer is you do have to get all of pretty much everything. And then once you do that, it's like, well, that was fun. I kind of went through this journey, completed this mission. but now what? It's kind of like playing Super Mario Brothers and playing the first level over and over again. You're like, well, it was fun, but what's next?
I honestly think
Is there level 2?
I think the place. I don't know who your intended crowd is, but I think a place that this could fit in is like a family game.
Oh, absolutely.
I know my kids. I have 3 boys, 3, 5, and 7, and we are now playing games often together. And they love flipping something over and getting shocked at whatever's there, and they forget that they did it last turn or last game or whatever. And it's all simple enough that you're in a trap. That makes sense. You can't move until someone comes and gets you. You have to go find these gems and bring them back home. So I think I don't know who you had in mind for this game, but if you don't know yet, or if you don't want to change it much from what it is, I think family could be a great target. But regardless of what you do, I think for the type of game, the length doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me
Right.
as it stands. I think if there's more of a challenge, so more conditional tiles or more, it feels like you're going on missions or quests. Like you even have like quest cards that say, hey, you need to go catch a unique fish out of each river.
Well, I like the idea that you suggested earlier of just having more cards, having 60 cards, but still only putting down 36.
Yeah,
and
make
I
a variables.
don't know who said something about who said knowing that you need the shovel and the fishing pole. Was that you?
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly that. If you had 10 different gems, if you still only had to collect 6 gems, but it was a random 6 every time, so it was a random 5 plus the white one every time, then you wouldn't know at the beginning if you needed the shovel or the fishing pole.
But it's weird if you get DQ'd because you didn't bring in the right tool.
Well,
Actually, you
I'm
can
just
go
saying
back and
that,
get
so you
them
can go
otherwise.
back and trade it at the
Yeah.
trading post. Or
No, that's true.
That's what I'm saying. Is so now you don't necessarily, because I can see this game being solved. Like you can say, here are the best equipment, because the scenario, the puzzles you're going to run into are always the same. It's just the order that they occur in. And so you can sit down and figure out, okay, for 2 people, this is the best equipment. For 3 people, and this can be something that without maybe having more cards than 36, like having 50 cards and you pick 36 of them, or just changing up what's on the board so people don't know every time exactly what they're going to run into, I think you get a lot more...
There's more experience out of the game.
A lot more mileage out of this game. For all the work that you're doing to design 36 cards, if you design 14 more, you're going to get a
much better
huge return
experience.
on that effort, as opposed to starting over again on a new game.
Because I was excited about the grid. I was excited about so much hidden information and being able to move spaces and seeing that. But yeah, knowing that there would be hidden information would be excellent for me as well.
Yeah, and I think either you need to speed up the game. The game length isn't intimidating. I think we played an hour and 15 minutes or so. That's not a long time to play a game. A lot of people in a night can get an hour game in.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's intimidating, but for how the game is currently set up, it felt like it should have been shorter in the version we played. So either add more things to do, you're going on quests, you're more conditions. It's like, oh, well, the yellow gym was cool. We had to get both people there. To even be able to do something with it. So, or even like the mom-son was cool, because you had to go find the son before you can go back to the mom and get something from her. That was really cool how
I
the
just want to
tiles
see when they're
interacted.
both next to each other.
Right, and that changes the game
there it is.
huge,
There it is, right
because depending how the board lays out, if you find one element first that you know is a prerequisite to another element, or that activates another element, or if you find the element that needs activation, you're now going around the board looking for its match or its partner. And so if there's more of that, where there's kind of mini problems within the big problem to solve, I think you can get away with having a game this long, and it stays more engaging and more fun and less solvable, especially with adding the extra tiles.
And that was one thing I wanted to point out, that the solvability in it makes the challenge less and less every time you play it.
Right.
And as is, we were able to solve it in the first time we played it, and I don't know how many events we had left, but I felt like we had
maybe
a
we
fair.
got lucky. Maybe we
Yeah,
didn't.
we definitely could have easily gotten lucky in our layout, but the fact that we could beat the game in a way that I felt was fairly easy, it seemed to me like the chance for me to return to that game with the level of solvability in it is very slim because I've got the experience out of it that I
Right.
needed. And I don't know how much testing you've done on this, and maybe you have some data to back this up, but commonly in a lot of these pure cooperative style games, you'll see that the statistic for what they consider to be a challenging game is like 40-60% is what I understand. So the win rate is 40%. So 40% of the time you're going to win, which means that the majority of the time you're going to lose, but it doesn't get to that point where it feels impossible. But it seems like, okay, if we had done this or this, I'm going to win. And I just didn't get that kind of challenge here because once I was worried very early on with the black gem. Like I was concerned about that, thinking, oh, it's going to get harder if we don't get rid of this stuff. They're going to compound. The pace is going to speed up, something like that. And it just the pace felt the same the whole way out. There was no real urgency to me to do that. And once I realized that we could save the black gem, it's fine. And once we had the teleport, it meant we could travel around the board a little bit easier. And so there were ways to mitigate it. It didn't feel super challenging. Now, I will say, we talked about this off camera a little bit, that a 2-player game seems to be exponentially more
Right.
difficult than a 4-player game
Yeah.
because of you get half as many actions as we had.
And I think you recognize that because there are some things in there that scale the difficulty level. Like
Or
you only get
traps, yeah.
three. You
Traps.
only get 3 emergency chips.
Starting
traps.
health,
The
or
traps,
hunger.
the starting hunger level. So there are things that you're putting in there
About a half
to
whatever your players
like
are.
yeah, you recognize that certain cards scale to the number of players that are in the game.
Yeah, that was
so
nice.
you recognize that there is that the 4-player version is easier than the 2-player version without you doing some kind of balancing. And I don't think you're quite there yet. I don't think
Right.
the 4-player version, and maybe it just depends on, I don't know how many people you consistently play test this with, if you're generally doing it with 2 or 3, if you're generally doing it with 5 or 6. But I think, and not to take into consideration with what Adam said, consider your target audience in mind too. If your target audience are hobby gamers or people play a lot of board games in their 20s and 30s and 40s, this is not hard enough. If this is for families and younger people, then you're probably at a good difficulty level and everything like that. So a lot of this, keep that grain of salt with, figure out who your audience is.
But I'm going to jump in real quick with the family stuff. I think that when you are directing it at families specifically, these pure cooperatives are really good tools for learning and teaching kids how to lose well, because they don't feel isolated in these styles of game as, oh, I lost because everybody ganged up on me. We all lose together, and you can have that experience. So if it is a family game, I still think that you
Sure.
can increase the challenge because it creates the experience for the younger kids who don't deal with loss very often to have that opportunity with their parents to lose a game and still be okay with it.
Sure. And
My kids just start cheating. They hate losing no matter what.
And yeah, right. Yeah, I cheated at solitaire until I was 36, and I'm only 35.
Less,
So,
yeah, exactly.
Next year I'll stop.
Right? I'm gonna eventually. I'll get
promise.
around to it. I'll get around to it. So yeah, all I was saying is keep your audience as you're scaling that difficulty level. Keep your audience in mind. That I do not disagree with Tyson that the difficulty level just would in general need to come up, especially for 4 players like we played today. But if it's 10% or 30%, depends on
right.
Are you aiming for a group of 30-year-olds? Or are you aiming for some kids and some adults and a mixed group? So.
And I want to move on, move a little back towards our. One thing I noticed, we're making all these suggestions to increase the card count or make some hidden information. And A good way, maybe a good game you could look at is Legendary. How they do their sets is that you have like your villain deck, and then you choose like different sections. So one thing I noticed, you have your mom and your son. So if you're doing extra cards, you may not get them both together. So you can pair cards and put them in together as a set. So
Right.
like you need to, like you want the mom and the son in this time, so shuffle those both in. Or you, to do more scenarios, you can do that to make it a new mission.
Yeah, design specific scenarios. So, like you said, if you have 50 cards, you can give them a
Yes.
specific 36 to pull out to say this is a hard version or this is an easy version. Or if you've played it enough and you just want to shuffle them up and see what random stuff you get.
And maybe just not have
Yeah.
gems one time, do a different condition. So
Right.
there's lots of different things you could do to make more scenarios and
Yeah.
more replayability.
And I'd also just a quick thing, maybe start the land breaking earlier. That was a fun mechanic, and I felt like maybe we played.
Or just break every round.
Yeah, like-
it's roll a dice, then break, then roll a dice.
Yeah, like
then-
we
Yeah,
played
I would
10
like that too.
We played 10 or 12 rounds, I think maybe, and it didn't start breaking until 6. So, like,
And it wasn't breaking every round after
yeah,
that.
and it wasn't, and
other,
it could
yeah.
not break. Yeah, like
We had,
I
what,
like that
4
mechanic.
tiles?
I
Yeah.
think making that happen more often would probably be a good thing. So,
Well, even deciding where the broken part goes too, based on a roll, because we
Yeah.
were just kind of putting where we thought. So having it go in a specific spot would be
yeah, we could kind of shape it to
give
our
us more
advantage.
direction.
So yeah, I think that overall you have a really solid core of the game here, and I would look into just expanding it a little bit, giving people a few more options, and adding a few more cards, a few more elements to increase the replayability, and then also keep an eye on how your difficulty scales, and then also look at anything that's kind of questionable in the rules that we had questions about, just revisiting the rules and closing those loopholes and answering those questions that we asked. Other than that, I think you have a great game. Keep up the good work, and thank you very much.